Hi everyone, Becky Nunn here. Thanks for joining us today. We are going to be making some holiday ornaments in this workshop. And this is, you can see these online, but these are the actual pieces. Let's see if I can show them to you. These are the actual pieces that we're going to be making. You can see that. And if holiday ornaments are not your thing, I'm just going to ask you to really focus on the techniques of what we're going to be learning here, because these are all jewelry making techniques. Again, I'm Becky Nunn with Nunn Design. We are a company that designs and manufactures jewelry components. A major part of our business is to designers that then purchase the products wholesale from us, and then they resell them, making fun jewelry and reselling them. We also have a large line of companies that stock our products. You can find links to all of these things, both the wholesale information and how to purchase from us wholesale, as well as information on how you can purchase the supplies for the class. And there's also links to where you can buy all of the product line that Nunn Design has to offer. But we're going to be doing a very small portion of, working with a small portion of what we have to offer as far as the findings go and the techniques. So again, if you're not into holiday ornament making, this is really about the techniques of learning how to do some of the fundamentals of what Nunn Design teaches here. Here's some examples of jewelry that you could make from this exact same technique that I'm going to be showing you today. It's a little bit hard to see this, but we're going to be learning how to make molds, and then we're going to be learning about crystal clay, which is an air dry epoxy clay. And then after that, we're going to be learning about how to mix Nunn Design resin, and then we're going to be learning how to colorize that resin, and then how to apply it onto the crystal clay that we already texturized with our mold. So that was an example. Here's another example of, so the last piece I showed you, that one was made with a brass stamping, which Nunn Design offers. This one is made, it's hard to see. This one is made with a vintage button. So I made a mold with a vintage button and then made this piece here. And you can also learn from us how to use organics. So we have a lot of different ways in which you can be educated, but this is another tutorial and video that we have up on our website showing how you can use organics to make a mold and then use the crystal clay and the resin over it. So there's lots of possibilities of this same technique. Here's a ring. The same technique that we're going to be covering today, using the holiday ornament workshop as the format. These are all techniques that you'll use elsewhere, and it's the foundations of many different projects that you can learn. And let's see what else. A couple things just to let you know. We have two other people online here with us. Cheryl, who is watching in the office, and she is going to be chiming in when she has something to add. And then we also have Melissa here, and she will be providing us links and different sorts of things as they come up. I see a heart. I don't have my glasses on, so I can't read. Although I must say, I'm going to say it right off, I was double dog dared by Annie House to say silicone, silly putty instead of easy mold silicone putty. So I did it, silly putty. Anyway, so that now that double dog dare is out of the way, let's see here. We're going to be going over a couple of different things, and as I'm going over it, Melissa will be supplying some links so that you can have other information. This workshop online here that I'm going to be walking you through is also on our blog in a full tutorial. and there is a downloadable link of a downloadable tutorial that you can download with all of the step-by-step instructions, and that will also help you follow along when you sit down to actually make these. Some of you are going to be making them with me, but as you watch them on delay, these are other things. And if we can't answer your questions right off, please know that we will be monitoring the Facebook feed throughout the day and times after, so I will be continuing to answer any questions that you might have as you start to explore with the products. All right, couple of things just to let you know. My room has already been brought up to room temperature. I am working in a room that's around 72 to 75 degrees because I'm going to be working with resin. As far as the supplies go, I'm not going to be going over the whole entire supply list. You can see that online in the tutorial. I'll just be introducing the supplies as we get to that stage of filming. I have a cold, and I might need to take water breaks. Sorry, to prevent from coughing. I was hoping that wouldn't happen, but I think it is going to happen. So bear with me. I have a microphone on. It's not going to be fun, but I'll do my best. Okay, so let me go ahead and move you. I'm going to move you to a straight down view so you can watch me. Oh, sorry about this. Sorry. Oh, darn. Hey, Nancy. I see Nancy from California is online with us. Oh my goodness, how am I going to get through this? Hang on. I have a Thort lozenger. Try that. Some water. Hey, Andrea. Thanks for joining us. I'm glad. Oh, darn, Melissa. I hope you're not coughing too much with me. All right. So here's some more examples of what we're going to be covering today. Hello, Gabrielle. Glad to have you. Hi, Deborah. Glad to have you. Hi, Karen. Sorry, guys. Okay, so the first part of this is going to be making a mold. And I'm going to be using this Easy Mold Silly Putty to make my mold with. And molds are also available online. I actually made up these two molds from a vintage button that I had. And since this isn't duplicable, I just made some molds that you can purchase. And I made also one with the brass stamping, which you're seeing here. But I just wanted to show you other things that you can do once you learn how to do this technique of using molds. You can use charms to make molds. Molds are best if it has a lot of high relief, like you're seeing here. Hi, Sharon. Hi, Robin. So glad to have you. So you can use all kinds of different things to make different molds. And here's that vintage button that I showed you earlier. This was, as you're seeing here, this is this button. And here is this mold. So you can get an idea of, once you learn this technique, how you can make your own molds, including organics. Here's a leaf, and there's quite a few really cool tutorials on our website showing how you can use organics. Here's another one with a brass stamping. So this just kind of gives you an idea of what you can do with molds once you learn this technique. But the silicone molding putty is a two-part putty. And you'll need to measure out, I have already 2 equal sized balls. These have already touched, so I'm going to remove this section right here. So I have 2 equal sized balls of the silicone putty already pulled off. I actually did measure this because I know exactly how much I'll need for this tutorial. And When you first start using the silicone putty, you probably will not have the exact amount. You might make your mold too big or too small. It's something that you will learn how to do with a little bit of time. So for this, because this is a fast curing putty, you have a very small amount of working time. You want to make sure that you have everything set up prior to mixing this resin. So I'm going to make the button one first. So I'm making this mold here first. So I have my 2 equal parts here. I like to use the top of my silicone putty to press down and make my putty flat. And for this purpose, I'm just going to go ahead and empty out the contents of that container, so that I can see, and you can see through there. I have handy some wet wipes that I'll be using throughout the tutorial. So I'm just wiping my hand down real quick from touching that silicone putty. All right, so we have the top for the silicone putty ready, we have our clay ready, and we have our stamping that we want to make the impression with ready. I put down a piece of plastic here, and this will help, so when I press that putty, it easily removes from the thing. Now this clay is a little bit finicky, so something that to know is that if you don't mix it fully, you will have certain things happen. Like this, it'll start to kind of bubble up and warp. So here's some examples of molds that I made that had some interesting reaction. And when I was making mass production of these, I made a lot to sell on our website. I really learned a lot on why this was occurring, and I'll go over some of those details. But if your molds come out like this, it's because you're not fully mixing your putty prior to stamping it, and that's even for somebody who's done this a lot. I actually had that happen as well. So hopefully some of these tips that I can tell you today will prevent that. So you have 3 minutes approximately to work with this before it really starts to set up. So you're going to want to work fast. That's why we have all of our stuff ready to go. All right, so one of the tips that I know is that first I start by just kind of pressing these 2 parts together, and this is just to kind of help it blend a little bit together. And then I start to fold it over with the white on the outside, and then I'm moving fast. And I have tried all kinds of different things. I've worked with my palm, I've worked this in with the palms of my hands. I've tried different sorts of things, and the best thing that I have found is to work with my fingertips right here, just really kneading it and pushing it around until it is no longer marbled. So the goal here is just to blend these 2 parts together until it is fully mixed. And then once you can't see that it's marbled at all, you're going to want to roll this into a nice round ball. I'm going to take this off camera to do. So I'm just rolling it in the palm of my hand till I get a nice round ball. And the ball and having it be really smooth will help it. So when I press down on the when I press down on this, so I'm not wanting it to have any creases like this. I'm wanting it to be a nice round ball. And if I do have some creases, I will kind of just move that into the back so that I can press down. So I have a little bit of marbling right there, but I'm just going to go ahead and press because I have a very small window here. I'm using the top of the lid and I'm pressing down, and you can see I'm just making it flat enough to go out to that outside rim of that circle there. Then I'm going to pick it up and I'm going to remove it. This isn't ideal, but I'm doing this through the lens of my camera, so it's kind of hard to see what I'm doing. But next you just press down with your vintage button or your organics, and you press it down into the mold. And I'm pressing quite firmly, and you can also pick it up from behind and press it up into the mold, just making sure that it is fully pressed up into all of those little crevices. And this is what's going to help me have a really good mold. All right, now you're going to want to let this sit for about 5 minutes, and then you will, when this is hard to the touch, you'll just peel this back, and this mold, the item will just pop out of the mold. It's really helpful to have, especially on this one, as smooth of surface as you can on this. And you know, I did my best in making them, but as you can see, there's still some that have little divots, and we'll talk about how we can fix that in the clay once we make the impression. All right, so now I'm going to move this one in. This is my impression that I have that I'm going to be working with. The next stage we're going to do is we're going to clean some of our bezels that we're going to work with. I'm working with the navette and a grande circle. And when I'm working with the crystal clay, especially when I'm working with the white, I like to clean my bezels first. And I've kind of gotten in the habit of cleaning all my bezels with a little bit of rubbing alcohol prior to doing items in there, because the clay, especially the white, will discolor if I have any of the oxidization that you have that is put onto the Nunn Design findings. So how this is plated is this is cast pewter, and then we plate this with a 24 karat gold. And to then create this aged like look, we then use a oxidization that goes over the top of it, and that's what's sorry on my camera. That's what's causing this to have a little bit of dark discoloration. So I'm just cleaning my bezel. First I used a little bit of rubbing alcohol, and then I used a wet wipe to just go in and clean all of that oxidization off of the piece. And you know, if I didn't do that, then I would then have some of that potential black showing up in my clay, and I don't want that. So go ahead and use a little bit of rubbing alcohol and a Q-tip, and you're going to go ahead and clean your bezels thoroughly, and then make sure that you put your lid back onto your rubbing alcohol before you get on to the next step. So now we have our mold that we've made using the Silly Putty, and we have our bezels ready to go too. And so the next step we're going to do is we're going to work with some crystal clay. And this is what we're working with, is crystal clay. And this is a great project for a beginner person, because you have 2 to 2.5 hours to work with this product. It's not like the molding putty. You have a lot longer to work with it, and then it cures in 14 to 16 hours, and there's no baking. So this is great for embedding and sculpting. In the package you will find the clay, part A and part B, some gloves, and a little beeswax applicator tip. Now I've already opened mine and taken my 2 equal sized balls of clay out, and I just wanted to show you that when you when you take your things out, these originally come in the same bag and they're wrapped in a cellophane. But when you put them back into your containers, put them in separate containers. I believe that this helps this colorant. This is the part B, and that's the resin, and this is a colorant. And I think that having these in the same bag and potentially can make this a harden sooner than it should. So I've always started to store my pieces right inside of each other. What about that one on edge? I'm not so sure, Sharon, what that means. The one on, what about that one edge? If you're referring to my cleaning, I will make sure that you want to go in and clean all of this thoroughly. I actually have some that I've done earlier, so I am set to make sure that I have really clean bezels. All right, so you have your epoxy clay, and this is, you have plenty of time to work with this. I've already measured out 2 equal sized balls. A question that Tabitha had for me on Facebook is how many bezels will a package, a 50 gram package like this produce? That's a great question, Tabitha, and a lot of our customers are production, making things production, or they're teaching classes. And so we did a calculation of how many bezels you can fill with this and how many bezels you can fill with the 50 gram as well as the 25 gram pack. So we'll post that information on our Facebook feed, and you can know exactly how many pieces that you will make if you use the whole pack. I've pinched off equal sized balls. I know that this is enough for these two pieces. And I know that because I have a little handy dandy scale, and I use this quite a bit when I'm working with the clay or working with the two-part epoxy when I was doing the silicone putty, because I was measuring out exactly the different amounts that you would need in order to do this. So this one here is going to take about 3.4 grams, and this one's going to take about 2 grams. So I have enough for those two pieces. So I have equal sized balls, and then wearing your gloves, which I'm not doing, but you're going to want to blend these together until they're fully mixed. Sometimes when you first start working, especially with the white, I've had problems where it's been a little bit stiff, and you can, like if I have opened up a package and stored it for a while, or if for classes and things like that, you can put it in a little bit of warm water and it will warm up the clay so it's a little bit softer. Other things, when you're working with other colors that we offer the black, the brown, and the white, but there are so many other colors. When you mix this, it can tend to stick to your fingers or your gloves, especially like you'll find on the black. You'll get a lot of colorant on your hands or your gloves. You know, that's why it's nice to have gloves, and you always want to have a little bit of wet wipes ready to go so that you can wipe your hands down after that. So I've mixed this together. I didn't do it for too long, and you can see it's blended. It's no longer marbled. And this is fairly sticky right now. So if I wanted to, I could just let that sit for even 10-15 minutes and then come back to it, and it won't be so moist and so sticky. But since we don't have 10 to 15 minutes, we're just going to go ahead and move forward with this. I have a little wet wipe. I'm wiping my fingers down. And before I go on to this next step, now my fingers are wet. All right, so now I have my ball of clay, and I'm going to use this, use the palms of my hand off of the screen, and I'm just rolling this into also a nice smooth ball. And like I mentioned before, this when you're first starting out, and if you don't want to have a scale, you will just guesstimate, and you will go ahead and just pinch off some and then put it into the bezel. If once you start doing production, you might want to have this scale. We have a link of where you can purchase this online, and then you would measure out exactly 3.4 or 3.3 of the clay so that it fits in that bezel. But most of you won't have that for this, so I'm just going to show you firsthand. I have a pretty good eye, so I'll probably be able to pull enough off. Probably about that much, I'm guesstimating, for the grande pendant circle. All right, like I said, this is still pretty sticky, but pinch off a little bit. Uh-oh. Still there? Roll it in the palm of your hand until it's in a nice smooth ball. And then you're going to place it into the bezel, and you're just going to pat it down until it is flush to the edge. So for this technique, I am using enough clay so that it is fairly flat. I want that surface to be fairly flat. As you get more and more familiar with this technique, you can do other things, and you can have a nice high dome. It's just a little bit more challenging to put the resin on it. It's definitely doable, but it's a little bit different than what we're doing here. So as you saw, I had pinched off just the right amount. Your luck might not be the same as mine. So you might not have a nice flat surface. So if you have way too much and it's domed, you can pinch this off and just remove that excess and then pat it down until it's smooth. Or if you don't have enough, you can either pull the whole ball out and add some more of this, or you can add some on there and then pinch it, keep on pressing it down until it's nice and smooth. So I talked about this one in the beginning. This is an example of where it's very domed. So this is just a little bit more challenging as far as when you pour the resin on. So we're just doing something a little bit more simple here. And here's some other examples. I made, these are using an old belt of my husband's, but you can see that these were also fairly high domed. But this is the same technique of what we're doing with this one. All right. Now that we have our clay mixed, we're ready to make our impression. And let's see, I'm going to go ahead, I'll do this one too before I make this impression, but this is going to go, I'm going to use this mold for this one, and then on this one I'm going to use this mold. So when you're using more of a shape like this is a little bit more challenging to get that into those corners. It was very easy just to do a round ball and then press it down in there and then use your thumb to press it down and bring it all the way over to the edge. On this one, let me show you. I'm going to first make a nice round ball with my clay, so I have a nice smooth ball. And then I like to pinch the little bit of that so I can just kind of push it into that edge. And then I'm using my thumb like this to pull it the direction that I want it to go. What do you guys think so far? Are you guys watching? Are you learning stuff? Well, let me know, because I can see your comments as they're coming up. I did just see that little heart pass by. Thank you very much. All right, so then when I get up to this area up here, you're just going to use your finger. Thank you. And I see those hearts. I see those thumbs. Thank you. All right. Oh, great, Grabby-Rel. I'm glad you're enjoying it. Thank you, Rob. I'm glad you're enjoying it. Thank you, guys. Hey, hi, Nani. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and now again, if you had too much, you would pinch it off. If you had too little, you would add more. And again, I made that look super easy because I had a pretty good idea already of how much clay it took to get in there, but that might not be your experience. All right. As I mentioned before, hi Linda. As I mentioned before, I have a cold, so bear with me as I have to take water breaks. All right. So now we have done the first two steps. We have made a mold, as you're seeing here, with using the silicone molding putty. And now we have mixed our 2-part crystal clay, this epoxy clay, and we've gone over the portions of what it takes to go in there. We cleaned our bezels, and now we're ready to make an impression. So to make an impression, you could do two things. One thing you can do now is take a wet wipe and just kind of go over all of this, but I'm going to do this after I've made my impression. So you're going to take your putty mold and you're going to then take your bezel. Now, just before I make this impression, I want to show you, you see that I have a rim, I have a circle inside of this circle, and so this circle is going to show up. So I'm going to try my best to get it within the edges of this so that I don't have a double circle, but even if you did have a double circle, it's fine. You see what I mean? I'm trying to line it up into that inside edge right here. All right. So then I'm going to press that down. I'm going to put that down on my work surface, and then I'm going to press down on the mold from the back side, and then you can also take it and you can press it up. Now, if I had a lot of excess clay and it wasn't really flat like we saw it there, it will squish out the side a little bit, and that's okay. You can go in and clean it up with a little bit of a wet wipe. So you can see that that's my impression. You see that extra rim right there? You know, there's times where, I mean, that looks really good, but there's times where it has come up completely blank, and I don't like it as much. So I want to at least have as much as I can of that design all the way in there. So just to let you know that there is that extra little circle here that will show up in your design. And it is a big focal in the actual impression when you make it. Now that I have my impression of this one, I'm going to set that aside for a second, and I'm going to go ahead and do whoa! This one is the snowflake one. I'm looking for a nice smooth area because I'm going to press it down into the bezel. I'm going to press the bezel down into that, and I'm going to have like an accent on the side like that. So I'm going to press it down. Once I put it on the table, then I'm going to press down. Oh, you can distract me, Sharon. I'm doing this, and my team also can help answer questions, or I'll answer questions later. But I'm hoping that you are enjoying this. All right, so now that I've made that initial impression, I picked it up and pressed it from the back side, and let's see how I did. See, my putty is very, very moist, and so this is what you will find is it'll stick to the mold, and it did there. Not a problem. If this impression didn't come out exactly how you wanted it, you can either pat it all the way down and start over again, or you can just pat it down like I am, or take a Q-tip and get it a little bit moist and go in and rub down all of the areas where there might have been an impression that you didn't like, or a mark. But what's so great about this product, this crystal clay, is the working time. You have a lot of time to fix this and get it just the way that you like it. Now, one of the things that you want to remember is once you have clay inside of the mold, just use a little wet wipe to wipe that away. It'll easily clean up later too. It'll just peel off, but just clean up your molds and have them ready for the next time. All right, so now that I have these two impressions, one of the things that you're going to want to do is go back in, and I'm just using a wet wipe, and I just put it around my fingernail like this, and I come along this edge, and I'll just clean up all of that that clay that I don't want in those areas. This is it is an air dry, and you have about 2.5 maximum amount of time to work with this. But if you don't clean it up off the surface, it won't be coming off. It hardens like cement. So be really tidy with your work and go ahead and clean up these edges as you're going, and then you will really like your results much more down the line. So then I'll go ahead and clean up this one too. I'll clean away all of this excess on the sides here, just making it nice and tidy. And if I didn't like the impression altogether, I can just go ahead. I would have let this clay sit a little bit longer before. All right. Oh, yes, I can give, okay guys, if you want to, I can give away one of these at the end. I would love to, Sharon. So tell you what, why don't you guys keep on leaving comments and such, and then at the end I will give away one of the ornaments that I'm making. It might not be this one, but it might have been one of the ones that I made before. All right, so then once you've made your mold, these are some pieces that I did earlier. You can see that I went in and I made this all nice and smooth. I went on along the sides. I really liked how it came over the side of this bezel here, so I didn't clean that up. So you can go ahead and just go along with your wet wipe and clean these up. These pieces I did yesterday, and I let them sit. I wanted my clay to be firm before I put the resin on, so you just go ahead and clean them up and then let them sit. And I see you guys commenting now. Hi, June. Okay, so now we have learned how to make the impression, how to mix the clay, how to make the impression, and now we're ready to move on and look at making the colorized resin for this. All right, so this is going to be a little bit of setup here. So for the colorized resin, when I'm mixing resin, I like to have a, sorry about my camera moving around, I don't know how to do that. I have a microphone attached to it. All right, so for my colorized resin, first I'm going to make my resin. I'm going to mix my resin, so I have my pieces ready. And before I even mix the resin, I want you guys to tell me which color should we make in this tutorial. Should we make this kind of orange color? Should we make this more dark, this dark blue color, or should I make this color here? Because I'm going to only make one of these colors for this tutorial workshop. So make sure to leave your comments and we'll take a look to see which color that I'm going to make. So leave your comments while I mix the resin. All right, so I'm mixing the Nunn Design. We have a Nunn Design resin. This is a little kit that the resin comes in. And you can purchase this directly on our website. I have some containers that are already open. So I have my part A and my part B. Oh my gosh, how am I gonna, okay, Melissa, you're gonna have to give me a tally of which color to do. All right, so you have your part A and your part B. So I have my resin ready to go. So I'm first setting up my station. As I mentioned before in the beginning, I have my room temperature is brought up to 70 degrees. I have some really great information on our blog, and Melissa can put the links to it that goes over all of the steps you'll need to do to prep your work surface to have best results. So you can also get information from the website. So I'm going to be after a mixing cup, a stir stick, and I'm going to have some wet wipes ready to go. And I usually use my phone as my timer, but since I'm using my phone to film, I'm actually going to use my rinky-dink timer from the kitchen. So you'll have that ready to go because we're going to be mixing for 2 minutes, and I think we're ready to go. All right, so on my mixing cup, when you open this up, you're going to want to mix up to, you have to do a full cup of these in order for this resin to fully cure. And I'm going to tell you right now, unless you have a lot of bezels that you're ready to go with, you're going to have some waste. And as you're first starting out, you just have to allow yourself to learn a new technique, and you might mix a cup and then not use all of it. But if you have already mixed, you've already done, here's some examples I have on the ready. I probably won't get to these, but I've already done up a couple of other pieces that I have on the ready so that I could use my colorized resin on these pieces too, so that I have as little waste as possible. These are some impressions done in the little bezels. This is an impression done on one of the flat tags. And here's an open back bezel. So anyway, these are all just different examples that I have. I'm always making pieces with excess clay and then setting those aside and then waiting until I mix up a little bit of resin, and then we'll pour it over it. So my point is, if you don't have the experience yet, you might not, and you're making this for the first time, you might waste some resin. So bring it up to the 1 tablespoon mark, and we're going to first pour the part A. Now this is not a weight thing, this is a volume thing. It has to be a 1-to-1 ratio of this. Looks like the darker blue is the winner. Okay, thanks Melissa. All right, so I'm gonna step away here so that I can get down eye level of this, and I'm gonna open up the top of my resin, and I'm gonna pour in until I get to the 1 tablespoon mark. So get this going here, hopefully you can see this. So I'm pouring my resin, and then as I get up to that 1 tablespoon mark, I'm going to lighten my flow by changing how my bottle is positioned, and I'm just kind of drizzling some right until I get to that 1 tablespoon mark. I twist my lid to stop the flow. I'm boom, spot on. And then I have the habit of using one of my wet wipes to wipe the top of my bottle, and then I put the lid back on. now I'm going to take the part B and I'm going to bring it up to the next mark, which is, here's an empty one, I'm going to bring it up to the 2 tablespoon mark. So part A always goes in first, part B goes in second, and I'm going to bring it up to that 2 tablespoon mark. And I'm pouring, 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 and then right when I start to get up close to where that mark is, I'm going to slow my flow down a little bit. I'm just getting there. And then drip, 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 boom, I'm spot on. Then go ahead and wipe the top of your cap again. I moved over a wet wipe so I had a clear spot. And then I'm going to put the top on. Then typically I use my timer on my phone. You're going to set it for 2 minutes. I'm using my rinky-dink timer from the kitchen. So, but I will know when this is was mixed. So I have it set for 2 minutes. So with the fat stir stick, I'm going to go ahead and start stirring. And this is a very full container, so you want to go slow so that you don't overflow. And I am looking at this down through my camera, so this is a little bit tricky for me to see what I'm doing, but you want to mix it together, and while you're mixing it for those 2 minutes, you're going to be scraping these side edges. And then throughout the mixing time, you're going to be scraping the sides of the stick back in. So stir, stir, stir. You can see that right away the resin became a little bit milky. And as we blend these 2 parts together of the A and B, it'll start to become a little bit less milky. And if you have a lot of bubbles in here, don't worry about it. We can set that aside for a little bit, and those bubbles will automatically dissipate. But I'm bringing these 2 colors together by scraping the sides of the cup and then scraping my stir stick, and then continue. So 2 minutes. Sometimes I have students, like when they're taking a class, they're really intimidated by this process, and so they won't stir it very fully. And so when the 2 minutes is up, it might be slightly, see, it's still a little bit, you can tell it's not clear yet, it's not blended. So even after the 2 minute mark, some students have to continue to keep mixing, and that's fine. You just want to make sure that you're mixing it enough until it's fully blended. So scraping the sides, scraping my stir stick, and coming back in and continuing for the full 2 minutes. And as you can see, I have some bubbles, so I'm not worried about that. That's gonna come, those are gonna dissolve with time. All right. How are you guys doing? You finding this interesting? Hope you're still here with me. All right. So my timer went off, and you can see that my resin is mixed. It's nice and clear. And scrape off my sides and go back in and just scrape one more time on the sides and the edge. So, you know, some people don't scrape their sides back into the cup at the very end. I do, because I know that I have already mixed fully all the A and B into that piece before I got to that stage. All right, since I like to work on plastic, I can then lay this down. This will cure with time, or you can use a wet wipe to wipe your stick, and then I reuse these. Yes, a few bubbles are okay, because we're just going to let that sit. We're not going to pour it right away, but I'm also going to colorize it. So when it's not okay is when you're using ephemera, like a picture or a photo. You don't want to just pour this directly into your bezel, because those bubbles will show up, and then you have to get rid of them. But these bubbles will pop over time. A lot of people let it sit for like 5 minutes. We're going to move on to the next step. As you look, you can see you do have to be extremely precise. This is exactly a 1-to-1 ratio. And if it isn't 1-to-1 ratio, you will compromise this possibly not curing. So it's great to just get in the discipline of making sure that you are precise with this. All right, so for now that we've mixed our resin, we're going to go ahead and set that aside up here. And I'm going to talk to you about the colors. On the tutorial that you'll see, we have these formulas. Heather at the Nunn Design office made these little formulas for us. These are fantastic. It's showing me how much resin I need, and then the different colorants using the casting crafts. How much of the color do I need to use in order to make these different colors? So this is the color that everybody has decided that we're going to mix. But on the website, there's the formulas for the other two that you can see. And so the same process you will do with those. And there's dozens of different colors. We try to do the latest PMS colors. It's our little cheat sheet for showing you how to mix these different formulas. Yes, so Jennifer, your question is there a way that you can remove the resin? Yes, you can. If you pour the resin in and over time it just doesn't cure, you can take an old pot that you get from the Goodwill, put some water in there and boil that water, and then drop the bezel in, and then remove the resin and salvage your bezel. So here is the color that we're going to be using. Here's the formula. So we're going to be using black, white, blue, and red. And just to let you know, this is not an exact process. So we might not get exactly this, but I'm going to get us as close as we possibly can to this color. All right. So the first thing is we're going to put 1 teaspoon of resin in, and then we're going to add the colorants. So I'm going to just stop for a second because I'm concerned that my phone might run out of batteries. I want to make sure that I don't. So I'm going to plug it into, I'm going to just get it charging here just in case, because this is a long tutorial. And I want to make sure that we have plenty of batteries. All right. I also have to... All right, sorry about the little technical thing. All right, so now we're going to go ahead and mix this color. So the first step is we're going to take the resin, and I'm going to pour it into the cup up to the 1 teaspoon mark. You can see that on my cup right here. So we're going to add in, and if you're going to make more, just double the formula. But for this one, I'm just using up to the 1 teaspoon mark. So I pour a little bit into my cup, and then this formula calls for black, white, blue, and red. So I have all of my colorants ready to go. These are the colorants that we're going to be using to colorize that resin. And on the formula, it has TP and TTP. If you want to look on the blog, it actually shows pictures. I will do my best to communicate it too, but TP is tiny, is toothpick, and then this is very tiny toothpick. And I will show you the difference of those as we go. I'm also going to use, so I have my my resin ready to go, the 1 teaspoon cup. And I'm going to pull out a couple of toothpicks, and then I'm also going to have a little stir stick that I'm going to be mixing this colorant with. On the stir sticks, these are really big. I just break them so that I can just use a section of them. And then I'm also going to have on the ready some fresh wet wipes for my hands so that I'm constantly wiping my hands down with if I get resin on them and such. All right, so the formula calls for... We have 1 tiny toothpick. We have 2 toothpicks of black. I have to tell you, I'm a little bit nervous about mixing these live, but here's the black. And so on the black, I always make sure I'm shaking my bottle. I'm always making sure that this is fully that I've shaken that up fully before I open up that lid, because it kind of settles inside of there. And then, let's see, let's go ahead and put another little so I can put my toothpicks and such on. All right, so I've got a lot going on my screen. I move my formula off. All right, so here is my colorant. I'm bringing it up to the surface, and then I'm going to pick up some of that black colorant. This is a toothpick, and a tiny toothpick. You'll see what a tiny toothpick looks like in a second. So I'm going to pick up some of my colorant, and I'm going to add it to my resin. So this calls for 2 tiny toothpicks, and so I really didn't get that much. And I also think that this resin needs to, you guys, this isn't, is this even black? No, yeah, that's black. All right, I need to shake that bottle up, because when I could tell that opaqueness wasn't all that opaque. I know what happened. I put the blue lid on my black, and so that was showing up a little bit blue. And so I just cleaned that off. Grab me a fresh wet wipe. All right, so now I have my black, and I've shaken that up a little bit more. And I'm going to put in a toothpick. That's a tiny toothpick of black. There's one. And now I'm not going to make sure I try not to touch the edge of my colorant too much, because I have resin on that toothpick. So there's my black. Put my toothpick aside for the black. And now I have, it called for 2 tiny teaspoons of black, 3 of the white, 1 of the blue, and 1 of the red. All right, so for the white, I'm just going to squirt some in. Guys, I might not be exactly right, but that's 1, 2, 3. I'm just guessing. All right, so then Nancy, you're taking a peek from work. Well, you can watch the full thing later, because it is kind of lengthy. All right, so now we're on to the blue, and for the blue formula, it asks for 1 tiny toothpick of blue. So I'm going to, again, bring up some of that colorant right to the surface of the bottle. And then let me show you what a tiny toothpick. Tiny is tiny. You just want a tiny bit of that blue, because this is really strong. The blue is really strong, and the same is true for the red. So I'm bringing up a tiny bit of it to the surface for the red, tiny, tiny bit, adding that to my mixture. All right. Here's where the moment of truth happens, because I went a little crazy on the black, so let's see how we did. All right, this isn't looking, I'm trying to see it through my camera, but I'm just mixing this together. I know I have way too much white. I'm not quite where I want to be at all with my blue. So I'm going to add, I'm just going to guess. I think that what I'm missing here is a little bit of blue and a little bit of red. So I'm going to take my toothpick for the blue that I used earlier. I'm going to grab another tiny bit of blue and add that in and see how we do. And you will get better with this with time. And I'm going to add a little bit more of my red as well to bring up more of that blue color. And now let's see what we did. You can see that made a huge difference, just adding that additional blue. All right, guys, so it's not quite exactly where we need it to be, but we're gonna just keep on moving forward, because I like that color. It's not the color I wanted, but it's good. All right, take a couple of seconds after you've worked with your colorants to put the right lids on the right bottles and clean up all of that. All right, so now we have our colorant. So that gives you an idea of how you mix your colorants together following the various formulas that we saw here. This is the color that we're going for. It's pretty darn close. If I wanted it to be exact, I would probably add in a little bit more of the blue and maybe a little bit more red, just a little bit more to bring that right up to where it needs to be. I also have a little trash bag right beside me, which I always have. I have a little resin on my plastic, so I'm just cleaning that up with my wet wipe. And now I'm ready to, I'm willing to put this onto my impression. So, all right, so we have gone through. I'm just going to recap real quick. We made a mold using a vintage button, or we made it with a brass stamping. Then we learned about cleaning the bezels so that they're nice and clean. Then we learned how to mix the clay, and we placed the clay inside of the bezels and we cleaned them. And then we learned how to make and mix Nunn Design resin using the Nunn Design resin kit, part A and part B. And then we added the different casting craft colorants and made all kinds of different, I showed you about different formulas that you can make, and there's a cheat sheet on our site. Then the next thing that I do is I like to work in places where I can move things around. So I have some business cards, and for these pieces here, these business cards, this part here has a nice glossy surface, and this is great because the resin doesn't stick to this glossy surface. The other side was dull, so I put a little bit of packing tape over the surface of my card so that when the resin, if the resin overflowed, it wouldn't get stuck onto the card. So I like to use these cards because it allows me to pick these pieces up and move them once I've worked with them. So it's just something that I always have on the ready. I can then move this whole thing to another section on my work area and just slide it onto my work area without having to risk touching the piece at all. So now I have my cards ready to go, I have my two bezels ready to go, and I have my resin ready to go. And I'm ready to apply my colorants onto my piece. So for adding the colorants onto the piece, you'll want to just drizzle a small amount right onto the bezel of the clay. I'm going to start out, I'll just put about that much and we'll see if that's enough or not, and I'll show you how you can clean this up and add more. So with another stir stick, I'm just going to, you can either pick this up all together or you can pick it up on the card. It's like frosting a cookie almost. You just move this around and bring it all the way over to those side edges. The one I'm doing live here might not look the best. I'm looking through my camera and it's hard for me to see exactly what I'm doing. Alright, so once you have it kind of in position, you can then scrape this excess resin and put it back into your mixing cup. But you can sort of see this starting to come about. So I'm just mixing, I'm just scraping off the excess resin and putting it back into my stir cup. All right, so that's the look that I did for, let's see, this piece here. Is that I left a lot of resin on, and I just had a little bit of that white highlight coming through. And then for this piece here, I actually wiped the resin away, which I'll show you. You just take this and you just wipe. And so now I'm just wanting the resin to be down in the recessed areas, and then I'm having more of the white come through. So there you have it. What do you guys think? Then I'm going to place this down. Ooh, Wedgwood, love that. I'm going to place that down, and then I'm going to let that set and cure for, this is going to cure fairly fast, but you're going to want to let it be completely alone for, I don't know, 12 hours. So here's the other one. And I'm going to go ahead and put my card down. And I have a little bit of resin on my fingers, so I'm just going to wipe my fingers real quick. It does kind of look like a cameo. So you guys are getting the idea of how, you know, this technique can totally take off for you, and you can do whatever look that it is that you like. So on this one, go ahead and drizzle some of the resin. So this resin, we'll talk about in the tutorial more. It has a certain work time, which is referred to as its pot life. And oh, so the resin that got on the edges, you're going to go back in with your wet wipe and just do the same thing that we did with the clay, or bring it all the way over to the side edges and make it consistent. So like here's an example of where, you know, it's all the way over to that side edge, and you can see how that looks. Other ones, let's see if I have any where I actually clean the edges. Here's one where you can see it didn't go all the way. So on this, I have to tell you, I have a major mess going on here because I have a cable going from my phone to my computer to make sure that it stays charged. All right, so I placed my resin down, and the same thing we did before. You just scrape off that excess resin, and it'll drop down into that, more into the recessed areas. You can go in with the toothpick and you can move that resin all the way over to the sides, like you're seeing here, and just kind of drag that resin over to that side edge. This is a self-doming resin. It just basically wants to know where that edge is, and then it'll stop. So go into these areas up in here and move that resin all the way over to those side edges. And then to have more of that white pop out, this resin will slowly start to go down into those crevices. But if you want to have even more white, you can take your wet wipe and just go in and remove that excess resin. And then you can go back in and move that resin back into the areas where you might have wiped it away. So you can kind of get the idea. Super fun, huh? All right, guys, so now that you have your two pieces finished, you'll let those cure. I have them on my little cards so that I can move these around. And then the next step you would do is, it is pretty forgiving for a newbie. You know, this is one of the more difficult techniques that I probably teach because there's so many steps. But each step is workable, and there's different ways in which you can fix things. But after you're done and you've let those cured, you can put on a little ribbon like you're seeing here on these pieces. I just have ribbon. We also have available these little ornament hooks that you can purchase on the site. And then you can add a jump ring, and on the tutorial it shows how to open up a jump ring and how to attach that to the piece. So let's see here. I'm going to move the camera, come back to talking to you direct. Hi everyone! Alright, well, I hope that you've enjoyed learning how to make these ornaments, and that you can see that there's many different things that you can do with this technique once you've kind of landed it and feel confident. It makes fantastic, this technique makes fantastic jewelry. And it's all air dry, so there's no kiln, and it's accessible. So I'm going to wrap it up. I'll answer all your questions. We're going to pull a winner, and then you can choose which of the ornaments that you saw that I made, and then we'll send it out to you. So we'll post the winner and then contact you for your mailing address, and we'll go ahead and mail the winner their prize. And thanks. I hope you enjoyed watching. Bye-bye. I don't know how to